Yo, what is up? You have found We Like the Blazers. I am Brandon Goldner, and with me, as always, it is Ryan Whitledge. Ryan, what's up, man?
Not much. Just sitting here chilling on a Saturday with a cup of coffee.
Finally, we're both drinking coffee at the same time. It's usually like I'm drinking coffee and you're drinking a beer, or I'm drinking Crystal Light and you're drinking gasoline.
Gasoline.
So I like how we have matched our drinks. Hey, quick editing note. So I interviewed Brandon Scoopy Robinson. I messed up the date, so I had to do that interview yesterday. Ryan couldn't join, but now here Ryan and I are. And then on top of messing up the date, I also forgot to when I was introing, I forgot that we were going to talk today. At any rate, there's going to be some tricky editing to splice everything together, but all will be well. You'll hear that interview with me and Brandon after this. But
this is just your tricky way to force me to listen to our own podcast.
That is correct.
You schedule interviews in the middle of my workday during the work week, so I can't be a part of it. And now you get me as one of those downloads and streams to try to, double our listenership.
That's right. And we can talk shit about you the entire time. No, Brandon and I talked about Damian Lillard, his time in Portland, whether the Blazers can build around him. We talked about trades for Dame. So anyway, check that out. It's coming out after Ryan and I talk right now. But Ryan,
are we out of Brandon's? We did Brandon Sprague last week. Brandon Scoop. We need to get like Ryan McDonough on here. I need this evened out. He's the Odyssey NBA insider, former GM of the Suns. We probably should get him. I feel attacked. I feel attacked. We need more Ryans.
That's
more
fine.
Ryans on this podcast.
I wish I could just keep finding people named Brandon to come on the show in perpetuity. That would be incredible. However, we do have plenty to talk about because we had free agency begin this week. And while the Blazers didn't do a ton, they did some stuff. So let me hand it over to you. What did the Blazers do? I don't know where you want to take this or if you want to go through a timeline or whatever. I'm just going to hand the keys to the car over to you. Blazers, big players in free agency, big players.
Okay. It's not coffee in her coffee cup if you think there's big players. Because as free agency opens up and we all start nervously doom scrolling Twitter, I did not turn on Woj notifications because I knew that Woj and Shams would be tweeting a whole bunch of crap that I maybe necessarily did not care to see. You got Chris Paul somehow getting 4 years and $120 million from the Suns. Kudos to him for chasing that bag. But the first
only $70 million guaranteed, we found out today, but still a ton.
Oh yeah, that's right. That's also that's the confusing thing is now that we're past that moratorium period, now you're getting the retweets of these deals that were already. And I hate it when they're like breaking news, so-and-so signs. We're like, that wasn't breaking news. We knew he was coming to this team. They need to word these tweets as contract details, not breaking news.
They want the double engagement. And beyond that, you also have this the incentives of the contract make the numbers seem bigger than it is, right? So the players' agents are like, we want you to report 40 million, but it's really these unlikely incentives. It's really only 28 guaranteed, but the 40 million is what people remember and do the clutch points graphics about. But yeah.
And that's weird too. They're calling out the agents and the players' agencies a hell of a lot more in these tweets than before. So yeah. But anyway, so the Blazers, they start theirs. The only thing that we cared about at the start of free agency was Norman Powell. And before free agency kicks off, you got the Instagram photo and video of Norman Powell in his hotel room, all dressed up, free agency mode or whatnot. We're like, oh crap. And then, as we're all sitting there patiently waiting, we see the Cody Zeller thing, which we'll loop back on. We see Ben McLemore. Cody Zeller was first. Oh, excuse me. Sorry. I hate coughing on mic. But, through this then to Norman Powell, who does not use Twitter a lot, drops the 3 eyeball emoji and everyone's like, oh, what does it mean? What does it mean? And then we finally get the details.
I did not think that was good news, by the way.
5 years, 90 million. Okay. It drives me nuts because I reference it a lot, but I can't find the link to the exact article. But Alex Kennedy over at Hoops Hype years ago, I want to say back in 2017, 2018, wrote this article about players and their use of social media and interviewed a bunch of them, a lot of them, a couple guys off the record, a couple guys on the record, but talking about how they enjoy screwing with fan bases and how they like doing those just side eye emojis or shrugs or like brain explode or whatever, the cryptic tweets that you see that drive us as people in the fan base nuts. They literally do it 90% of the time just to fuck with people, like around the trade deadline, around free agency. One of the guys that he interviewed, he was saying, yeah, it was, after the game, we're in the locker room and it's the day before, and it's like coming up on midnight before, the trade deadline, or before like the flurry before the trade deadline or something. And I just turned to one of my teammates and I was like, dude, watch how many, watch the engagement I get from this. And all as he does is just tweet wow with the side eyes, and it blew up. ESPN took it, wondering what the heck was, what did it mean? All this stuff. They do it just to fuck with you. So that's
worked. It worked.
I do not buy into, like, I'll quote tweet those kind of things and be like, don't play with our emotions. But
I'm Ryan Whitledge. I don't want to have fun on Twitter.
Well, it's not that I don't want to have fun on Twitter. I don't want to have a fucking panic attack when some rich athlete tweets a side eye.
I thought it was, I thought it meant something. He tricked me. If that's what he was doing, if he was messing with me, then it totally worked.
What? You're gullible?
I am extremely gullible. You have no idea how gullible I am. But I thought it meant, so it was that. Plus, it was taking a while, and it was like after these teams that otherwise maybe would have had interest in Norman Powell had been using their money. And so at the end of it, it was down to like Portland and New Orleans, I think were kind of the two. Yeah,
the teams that we were looking at with cap space, I think the biggest concern, and it was reported that most teams expected Norman Powell to re-sign with the Blazers. So it's like from a fandom and a spectator perspective, the biggest concern was that the Knicks had a lot of money to offer up. So as soon as Evan Fournier was offered the contract by the Knicks, you're like, that's one of the biggest players off the board. San Antonio had some cap space that they could have thrown at him, but it's not entirely clear necessarily what direction they're going right now. They seem to be in a bit of not a rebuild, but a retool with some youth movement. And then the Pelicans are in the position of that they're trying to impress Zion. And if there is one
poor Pelicans,
if there is not poor Pelicans, because right now, if it wasn't for the Pelicans absolutely pissing away their chance to improve their roster and try to keep Zion from going to the Knicks that we just mentioned, they make the Blazers look better. Ish, at least, but yeah. So it took forever. We all stressed out. Finally, the news comes down. Norman Powell, 5 years, $90 million. I don't think any of us were expecting such a long-term thing, especially with the questions of Damian Lillard's future. There's no options on the contract, and now that the details have been revealed, it is a very smart signing. You maybe thought that the Blazers would kind of front load this contract so that it would be easier to trade if they do have to blow it up, rebuild, retool, whatever. That is not the case. It is an escalating contract. I think it starts off at $15.5 million this coming season and ends at about 21 or 22, somewhere around that range. So
it's the 20.4.
Okay, but it's the escalating contract. So yes. It's a lot more team friendly right now. And then all the rest of the signings that the Blazers have made so far, like we mentioned, Cody Zeller.
Wait, really quick. Did you have an opinion about the contract that Norman Powell got compared to the contract Gary Trent Jr. got? Because in my view,
it evens out $18 million a year.
Sure, but Gary Trent Jr.'s is 3 years, or is it 4 years with the team or player option? There's something about it, right? Where it's like
4 years, 3 years guaranteed.
Okay.
I believe.
So here's my question though, before we go on to the other signings. So when Neil Olshey made the trade for Norman Powell, I was among those that said, I like this trade. Norman Powell is a better player right now. The only twist to it at the time, I said, well, I'm quite sure that Olshey's worked out with Powell, that he would be at least strongly willing to re-sign in Portland. And it turns out that he did re-sign in Portland, and both players got similar contracts. Norman Powell's a little bit older, but he's a better player. So how do you evaluate now the trade that Olshey made, Gary Trent Jr. for Norman Powell? How does the fact that he signed, does it change it for you? Because it definitely did for me.
I had this same belief. I figured Gary would be getting somewhere between 18 and 20 million, that he would be better suited on a team that's a little more rebuilding because he is younger, whatnot. He does have a chance to grow and improve his game in a bigger role. Norman Powell is older and entering his prime and has already shown what he can do on literally a championship team. So, I think that that Gary Trent got a very generous contract, all things considered, with his age, and Norman Powell took a very team-friendly deal, for lack of a better term, because I think most people projected him to be making, to start next season, $22 million and have it be escalating. So it doesn't change it for me. I'm not one of these people who's like, oh, well, I'd rather have the young guy that can prove it. No, that's not the window that the Blazers are in. You have a proven commodity in Norman Powell, and he's always been the first domino that needed to be set in place in order for any other possible move for the Blazers to make.
And my point would be, because Gary Trent Jr. was a restricted free agent, ostensibly the Blazers could have guaranteed to have kept him had they not traded him. And with Norman Powell, he was unrestricted. This was fully his choice. That asset could have left with no value. The Blazers left sitting with no asset to replace that going out the door. And so the fact that Norman Powell re-signed, in my view, makes the trade for Gary Trent Jr. a very good trade. It codifies that the Blazers now have this asset under control through his entire prime. I don't think he's injury prone. I think that he probably fits in as like the third or fourth best player on a really, really good team, or maybe the second best player on an okay to bad team. So the Blazers can trade this contract later. Okay. So that being said, please take us through the other signings at the first. We're so exciting. We're so pumped for these former lottery picks to come home to Portland.
How many times has Olshey mentioned that in their press conference?
At least twice.
That he has, how many lottery picks from the 2013 draft, counting CJ McCollum?
I think that he's just trying to run up his bingo card and get everybody who was in the lottery from that draft. It's
either played for him or played for the Clippers with him before, or you were in that 2013 draft. That's all Olshey cares about.
By the way, because you're going to go to Cody Zeller, I'm assuming. He was on Adrian Wojnarowski's podcast talking about, you were drafted at pretty high up as a player who, thought that you'd have a pretty big impact in the league, and basically telling him you've become a role player. How do you feel about that? Right. And so I think it's interesting that Cody Zeller goes on that podcast. I don't know if that had anything to do with trying to elevate his name in free agency or whatever, if it was just they know each other or who knows what. But I do think it's interesting that he walks away from this with a minimum contract. I mean, he's not a terrible player when he's healthy, but I just think that's interesting. Yeah.
So the Cody Zeller, as like I said, we're all nervously awaiting the Norman Powell news. And the first thing that we see is Cody Zeller. And we're like, wait, what? For me, I wasn't as wait, what? I was only in that mode because I'm like, all right, can we get to Norman Powell? That's cool. Cody Zeller. He does have a history of being injury prone. I don't know how much I'm going to necessarily care about that. The Blazers for years now have upgraded their health and performance staff and whatnot. They've went from being one of the worst looked at teams with players having injury and whatnot to one of the better ones in the league. For a minimum deal, it's great. He's an upgrade-ish over Cantor. He can, when he's healthy and on the court, move laterally. Already better than Cantor. He played his entire career in Charlotte. Average 8.7 points, 6 rebounds on 57% shooting. He's a little bit better shooter than Cantor. There's going to be the drop off in rebounding because Cantor was literally one of the best rebounders in the league. But you need somebody in that second unit that is not going to be an absolute sieve on defense. And this addresses that. So I'm happy with it. It fits a need. It fits, it was bring back Cantor for $5 million, probably because I think that's what he got in Boston. Love the fact that he at least called that. Side note, when Cantor left and thanked the city of Portland, he said, I'll probably see you again next season, fully admitting that all he is doing is going between Portland, Maine and, whatnot, Boston and here. He knows it.
No, I think that the Portland, Maine thing's funny because fun fact, maybe you did know this, but Portland when it was Portland, Oregon was founded, the two founders, one of them was from Portland, Maine. The other one is from Boston, and they flipped a coin to name the city.
Yep.
Winner gets pissed. So we were a coin flip away from reporting the Boston Trailblazers and the Boston Celtics. By the way, this is weird.
Tangent time.
I'm not convinced that the Blazers get a franchise here in this city, whatever it's named, if the name of the city was Boston. Because would the NBA want to have two franchises with the same first name? Maybe it would be like Oregon, right? Like at that point, but I don't think you're going to have like a Boston Celtics and a Boston Trailblazers. Like, I just don't see that happening. So it's possible that coin flip, naming the city Portland, brought the Trailblazers into Portland in 1970. Okay.
Probably, but if you would have went the Oregon route, it also would have been a little more fitting with the game if you called it the Oregon Trailblazers.
Totally.
Yeah, there would be a lot of different emphases on the syllables there.
Yeah, you're right. Yeah, that's a good point. And maybe people would be more willing to separate the words trail and blazers and to try to mash it into one word.
It'd be the Oregon Trail Blazers instead of Oregon Trail Blazers. But anyways, okay. So Cody's
Oregon Trailblazers. That's a dope name. Okay, Cody Zeller, really quick. Your point about him being injury prone, I think it kind of is a problem in a sense. So I'm looking at the salary cap sheet. By the way, if you are a premium subscriber to the Dunked On podcast with Nate Duncan and Danny LaRue, you get access to these massive Excel spreadsheets that runs through the cap hits of every single team, every single player, every hold, every stretched contract. It is so in-depth. And honestly, I mean, besides the premium content that they produce, I've been a big fan of their work for years and years. We've had Nate on the show before. Hopefully he'll come on at some point this summer. But all this is just to say I'm appreciating this Excel spreadsheet because it's reminding me, Ryan, if Cody Zeller gets hurt, who is playing center exactly? Because the Blazers have not made a move on Harry Giles.
Yeah.
They've not made a move on Rondé Hollis-Jefferson, who is the other person who could maybe play center in a pinch. But are they planning to bring those two guys back? Because then if Cody Zeller is injured, I could see a future in which Nurk and Cody Zeller are injured at the same time. Center.
I think I know their plan, but let's work our way there. You're jumping ahead the dominoes because
I'm sorry.
Because the next
this
move
is what happens when we run with no notes. Anyway, sorry.
Hey, in my defense, the no notes, you did hand me the keys and I have notes.
That's true. And actually I another friend of the show, Dave DeFore, years ago told me, if you can get yourself off of notes and just be at the point where you can talk, I find that to be more engaging. And I used to do these really detailed notes, pages and pages.
I've
been trying to get better about just trusting, you and I think about this stuff a lot. Our opinions are not always the most well-informed or the best, but we follow this stuff closely enough to where you can talk about it. So it's now 50-50 on the notes. Anyway, sorry, continue. Yeah. Yes.
I go with the bullet points of things that I don't want to forget. That's about where I stand.
Nothing wrong with that.
But anyways, so the other signings that the Blazers have made have all been guards. And this is, I think right now, either Olshey is intentionally punking the fan base by saying, hey, you guys had an issue with a 3-guard lineup before. I'll give you a fucking 10-guard lineup and we'll see how I can roll this out here.
Well, remember, Dame is not a small guard, according to Olshey.
Everybody else on the roster is now. I mean, I think they signed Ben McLemore, who's, it's always funny to see how people want to spin certain things that, we brought in a sharpshooter. Okay. He's a volume shooter. Yes. I'm not expecting anything more from him than maybe what Kent Bazemore gave us when he was here. I
think that's a good comp. In fact, yeah.
They drafted, Greg Brown. They signed Trent Waterford to a 2-way contract, and then they signed Tony Snell. Tony Snell, I'm excited about because he is a legit 2-way mix between a shooting guard and a small forward, because he is not a small guard. He is 6'7", but I do think that it's being a little overhyped on him. But right now, as the roster stands, here's everybody who's under contract. We have Damian Lillard, CJ McCollum, Norman Powell, Robert Covington, Yusuf Nurkic. That's your starting lineup. Coming off the bench, Anthony Simons, Tony Snell, Derek Jones Jr., Nasir Little, Cody Zeller. There's probably your 10 or your 10-man lineup right there. CJ Ellaby, Ben McLemore, Greg Brown. there's still 2 roster spots that are open. And I am of the belief that, for one, if you look at the depth chart, Robert Covington is the only power forward that this team has, the only legit power forward. So while the Blazers are loading up on guards, there's still this glaring hole at power forward. And as you talked about with Cody Zeller, if Nurkic goes down and Zeller has to step in, there's no backup center. But this is where I think things get a little interesting because, for one, Paul Millsap is still out there, and that's long been rumored. Apparently, Kelly Oubre just got taken off the board by going to the Warriors. Yes. No, not Warriors.
Yeah.
No, he's coming from.
Oh, no.
Who'd he go to? Son of a bitch. Damn it, to the Google machine.
Why do you put us in these situations?
I don't know.
Hornets. That's a weird fit, but have fun in Charlotte.
But I think they gave him 2 years, $25 million or something like that. But either way, it was a contract that the Blazers weren't able to necessarily match. But and apparently that was Dame's big pitch that he wanted. It's reported that he personally tried to pitch Kelly Oubre on coming and playing with the Blazers. I'll have a quick aside on that here in a bit. But if you look at the Blazers Summer League roster as it stands, there's interesting names on there. And I think you can fill out the rest of the roster with the names and have it be okay. So besides our rookies and whatnot, you have players like Kenneth Faried, who's obviously now forgiven the Trailblazers for the Nolan Smith debacle. Because
if you liked watching Cantor on defense, you're going to love Kenneth Faried, especially in his 30s. I'm aware, but I like his, if you want to talk about people with athleticism and upside, I'm going to go with Kenneth Faried over, Greg Brown, who sounds super raw. But this is also where it comes in, where Cody Zeller being a little bit better on defense and looking at some of the other depth chart, if he is playing in a second unit with Derek Jones Jr. and Tony Snell is a little bit better of a defensive guard it's kind of, if you start to look at some of the parts, but I could realistically see Kenneth Faried getting picked up and filling up a spot. I could also, if you look at this, the most terrifying individual I've ever seen the Portland Trailblazers put out a photo of Michael Beasley getting on this roster. Okay. Did you see the team photos that they had? Okay, the Trailblazers account posted team photos of their summer league practice down at the practice facility before they headed to Vegas. And Michael Beasley, I think, was talking to Jordan Crawford. And it is terrifying. He is eyes wide, teeth clenched. You can tell he's trying to make a point, but it looks like Michael Beasley is about ready to jump out of his skin and murder whoever he's talking to. And it is terrifying. Either way, he's trying to make a name for himself. I could see him realistically making it on the roster. An interesting name that's also in there, but I'm not entirely sure it fits, seeing as that we're super guard heavy, is Emmanuel Mudiay. But the 2 names that I'm interested, that I think have a legit possibility of making the roster from this summer league team, is Kenneth Faried and Michael Beasley. Kenneth Faried, I'd be the most intrigued with. The other thing I'm hoping is that they do make a play on Paul Millsap and use that taxpayer mid-level, which is a Twitter conversation we had earlier. That is true. There is one name missing from this list of potential power forwards / centers that I am surprised has not come up yet, Ryan. Well, and as a Blazers fan, you should be ashamed of yourself for not mentioning this man.
I'm not talking about it via trade. We're talking about free agency and signing. You want to get down the trade route? We can get down the trade route.
I'm talking about somebody who's currently not on an NBA team. I'm talking about somebody who is 6'11", maybe 7 foot. I'm talking about somebody who could play power forward, or probably at this point in his career, center. I'm talking about somebody who has roots in Portland. I'm talking about somebody who needs to come home. I am talking about LaMarcus Aldridge, who said that he
How did that drop off my notes? How did that drop off my notes?
He is exploring a comeback into the NBA, as we know that LaMarcus Aldridge retired after he had more symptoms of the Wolff-Parkinson-White syndrome that he has dealt with for a long time. I will say this, when I heard this news, that was the first thing I thought was like, this fills a need. It would be nostalgic. Him and Dame have mended the fence. It would be perfect. Come home, LaMarcus. Come on, man, just do it. And by the way, like, I get that he's not the best player, but if you're talking about somebody who's going to be, competing for minutes with Cody Zeller, ? As the backup center, or I think that he's a better player right now, even at his age, than Cody Zeller. So like, And Cody Zeller's on a minimum, so who cares if you piss him off? That's what I would like to see. It's nostalgic. It's cool. It'd be a good story. Come home, Marcus Aldridge. Like, I would love to see that happen. So I'm waiting for that.
It's fine.
It's fine. It's Marcus Aldridge.
I'm aware.
Come on, man, get pumped.
Okay, I'm not going to get pumped because I don't expect him to do a lot. But here's also the way that I view this. If Blazer fans were perfectly fine watching Carmelo Anthony try to operate in the post and kill clock, we should just be absolutely ecstatic about the fact that LaMarcus Aldridge would do the same thing. And is a little bit better of a defensive player, but
a little bit better, even at his age and even how slow he is. He's a much better defensive player than Carmelo Anthony. Come on, much better.
But either way, I'm fully on board. If LaMarcus can clear the medical waivers and a team physical and all that, I'm fully on board with him taking a vet minimum. I love the fact that people are like, why would he take a vet minimum? Well, he took a vet minimum to go play with, or quote unquote, play with Brooklyn last year. But also at the same point in time, his contract was bought out. He got all his money from the Spurs. He's not hurting for cash. There's that buyout option. He got a bulk of it. I think it was like 17 or something like that. 17 or 18 million of it was guaranteed in the buyout. You can take vet minimums for that kind of stuff now. So I'm not against it. Other names that are popular out there, you know, people are looking at Lauri Markkanen. But you know, I think he's asking for a little too much money. But that brings me to this Twitter conversation that we had earlier, real quick, of understanding how the Blazers want to use their options. I was a little bit confused. I got the taxpayer mid-level and the mid-level exception confused, but there are certain rules and certain things that you do. And especially with the Blazers being such a high taxpayer, or such a high salary team right now, is that if right now they have the biannual exception and the taxpayer mid-level exception to use at their disposal. The taxpayer mid-level, and I think, what do you say? They have about $6.9 million underneath the salary tax line.
Underneath the apron. Yep. 6.9 million.
Okay. Right. You can exceed the apron. So like right now, let's say, you know, for the Blazers orchestrate a trade in which they send out, you know, 30 million, but take back, you know, 38 million, whatever that 30 million plus the 125% is, whatever that comes out to. You can exceed the apron in these trades. I mean, just look at Golden State. Golden State has racked up a tax bill of $185 million because they followed the rules and the mechanisms that are allowed. But there are certain things that you do that then instead of you being able to pass that salary tax line, you are literally what they call hard capped, and you hit a wall and you cannot pass it. One of those things would be if the Blazers use the biannual exception. You are hard capped. Your salary cannot exceed $136,606.62 over the course of the season. That is the
thank you for the 62 cents. That part is very important.
When I researched it, I thought it was laughable. Like if you got to 63 cents, that's a no. But 61 cents, 62 cents, that's fine.
Apparently, you know, Damian Lillard is asking people for their Netflix logins. And so again, just another chip in the pile. The report about him leaving money on the table, probably not true, but
yeah, good job, cuz. Way to have your cousin call you out. Dame gets you a job on a spot on our NBA roster last year, and you're just going to throw that shade at him. But anyways,
what the Kelvin Blevins is that?
Kelvin Blevins, yes.
Kelvin Blevins.
But anyway, so if they use the biannual exception, they're hard capped. When people talk about Lauri Markkanen, Markkanen's probably asking for too much money. If he were to come here, he'd be a sign-in trade. You orchestrate a sign-in trade, you're hard capped. And so what that means is that if you are now pushing up against that, you need to make salaries match exactly. So that may limit a Ben Simmons or a Pascal Siakam trade or whatever ends up happening. Using the taxpayer mid-level, I will admit I screwed this up. I thought the taxpayer mid-level triggered a hard cap. It does not. If the Blazers are able to shed, I believe, $2 million in salary, that would open them up to having the full just mid-level exception. That would hard cap them. So you have to be creative in this, but they have the taxpayer mid-level exception at their disposal. 2 roster spots to use. I would expect that the taxpayer mid-level to be used on a player like Paul Millsap, and then maybe fill out the last roster spot with somebody like LaMarcus or a Kenneth Faried.
I have to say, of all the names that we ticked through, I think that I like LaMarcus Aldridge more than all of them. The second would be Paul Millsap. I think Paul Millsap looked like he was done in a way that LaMarcus didn't, frankly. Like, I think that and I know people age differently and sometimes, blah, 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 blah. But I don't think Paul Millsap looked great at all last year. And I thought LaMarcus Aldridge looked okay for the Nets, which I think is better. So
there also is, like, Millsap has been in Denver for a while, and you don't know if maybe that is age, because I think he's 36 or whatever.
Yep.
There is something to, that could be a little bit of age. That could also be, maybe there is something to a change of scenery. Like, we've seen it before, especially with older players or whatnot. And even take Carmelo Anthony as an example, or anyone the Lakers are signing, because they're just going for the geriatric squad, or what I call the 2014 All-Star squad. But maybe he gets a change of scenery. Here's the stuff of, he's too old, he's too washed up. And, he has one last little prove it year, and I'd be fine with him having it here. I don't expect it, but it'd be nice.
So with all of these moves, you have bringing back Norm Powell, you have taking in Cody Zeller, Ben McLemore, Tony Snell. We're saying goodbye to Carmelo Anthony and Enes Kanter.
And Zach Collins.
And we're saying goodbye to Zach Collins. Congratulations on him getting money from the Spurs.
Real quick. Okay. If any other team in the league had signed Zach Collins to that contract, we would laugh. The Spurs offer that, and we go, shit, what the hell are we missing? Because it's the Spurs. They're known as such a well-run organization, and they don't take a lot of whiffs. So when you see Zach Collins getting $22 million or whatnot from them, I'm not going to lie, there's a little thing in the back of my head going, what the hell are we missing here?
A, how much of that is guaranteed? And B, I think that we know Zach Collins, the player, as he showed so far, he would become a functional NBA player, maybe even a good NBA player. We don't know if he's going to stay healthy. 7-footers with repeated stress injuries in their feet. Not a great combination, not a great track record. Like, that's the thing is, like, if you were to guarantee he'd be healthy, Zach Collins, his option would have been picked. He'd be in Portland right now. That's the thing is that the Blazers clearly thought he's done, I think. Right. And I think what the Spurs did was reasonable. I'm guessing of the 20 million, probably 7 of that is guaranteed is my guess. And hey, if he comes back and he stays healthy, I think that he's a very, very functional NBA player. He's still pretty young. It's about the health. Right. So, but with all that being said, hello, Cody Zeller, Ben McLemore, Tony Snell. Welcome back, Norman Powell. Goodbye, Carmelo Anthony, Enes Kanter, Zach Collins. As of right now, nothing has changed. As of right now, the comments...
What are you talking about? We got all the guards. All the guards.
Let me start my monologue again, because maybe I'll clip this out and put it on YouTube. But as of right now, nothing has changed. And like, what I mean by that is that Damian Lillard said explicitly he'd like to see the roster improved, and all of the available reporting that we have as of now, and I think it's just from Chris Haynes and Jason Quick, and maybe there's somebody else who does original reporting that I missed it, have suggested the Blazers will not be making a trade anytime soon. Okay. And then we also have some reporting saying that Dame is willing to give this roster as it stands now with a new coach to give it a chance. Ryan, that doesn't make me optimistic. The history has shown that Neil Olshey is reticent at best to trade CJ McCollum. I don't have any confidence that he's going to trade him at the trade deadline. This to me really stinks of ownership and Neil Olshey not caring whether or not Damian Lillard stays or goes. That's how I take it. So do you have a different, like, are you like, oh, wait and see? Because I feel like the wait and see stuff, I don't know, man. That is not how this is hitting me. This feels like bad news.
It ties into my belief that if Dame was involved a lot more, he's putting a lot of pressure on the franchise. I guarantee you that he is maybe a lot more involved and things are being run by him, run through him, maybe a little more than they have in previous years. Not saying that he has the ultimate say on who stays or who goes, but he may be involved a lot more in, hey, here's our plans. Here's our attack list. Here's guys we're going after. Here's who we're making plays. Here's what our vision is. And Dame being informed a little more than he may have been in previous years. And then to see all these guys take minimum contracts, it was reported that like numerous people that went to, or numerous players that went to teams like the Lakers or the Warriors or whatnot, turned down more money to play on those teams for a vet minimum. And maybe some of those guys were on the Blazers list and got the Blazers were teams, or one of the teams that offered more money to these guys, that they turned the contract down to go join the Warriors or go join the Lakers. And maybe Dame seeing a little more of the inside of like, hey, well, why would that guy? Okay, well, we're seeing all these guys go just take cheap deals to chase a ring. Maybe this, if we're losing out on these good players that way, I don't know. I'm just saying maybe
what does that have to do with the trade though?
It doesn't. We'll get to the trade thing here. But maybe that does buy a little more time and buy a little more good graces. If he's been more informed of this and not seen this offseason go, that's my wishful thinking. Now, in terms of the trade,
are your lips getting sore from kissing Neil Olshey's ass?
I'm not a Neil Olshey stan. You should know this about me. I'm speaking from optimistic Blazer fan here. But as far as the trades go, I want to say I'm shocked. I want to say I'm surprised that the Blazers are not going to attempt to pull off a trade or whatnot before the season starts. But at the same point in time, I'm not shocked because CJ McCollum is Neil's guy. And Neil has spent years trying to sell that the backcourt of Dame and CJ is a good enough backcourt and one of the best in the league and can win a championship. And there's one thing that Neil Olshey hates to do, and that's admit that he's wrong. In fact, if anybody can show me a Neil Olshey soundbite or article or quote or whatever where Neil Olshey admits defeat and admits he fucked up, I'll mail you $5 myself. But
I got to get working on my deep fakes and collect on that $5.
But yeah, so I'm both shocked and I'm not shocked. Now, the other thing, Jake Fisher of Bleacher Report put out this piece the other days, and it was very vague in kind of its reporting, saying that, that Toronto and Portland had been in discussions in a CJ McCollum and Pascal Siakam swap, and the Blazers said no. That doesn't paint everything in a good light. He did a follow-up interview on 1080 The Fan with Dirt and Sprague the other day. And I will say he didn't have the most convincing justification or speech for his article. A lot of it was, this is what I'm hearing, but I'm not reporting kind of thing. It was very much a sit on the fence kind of interview. It was very strange to listen to for a lot of his takes. But I reach out. I've talked to a couple people about like what they knew about that. And the impression and the feeling that I get, and again, this is just loose understandings based off things I've heard from various people, is that it wasn't necessarily a straight CJ for Siakam, that this was more of a 3-team deal, and it involved Toronto, Portland, and Philly. And where the deal fell apart was on Philly's end. And as we know, Daryl Morey is asking for a king's ransom. I think that the 3 most likely teams to make a big move, to make a big trade move, are the Toronto Raptors, the Portland Trailblazers, and the Philadelphia 76ers, all for obvious reasons. But right now they're in a Mexican standoff. And it's going to
splash of Warriors in there too.
This is true. But the Warriors will only be in, like, the Warriors have no interest. Like, there's talks of Draymond Green or whatnot, but there is no world that exists in the multiverse in which a CJ McCollum for Draymond Green trade will happen, because the Warriors have zero need for CJ McCollum. So anybody who's hoping and wishing for that ship to come to port, it will not. But you can get the Warriors involved in a multi-team. I mean, exactly. we just saw that, when they finalized the deal that ended up sending Westbrook to the Lakers. That was a 5-team deal that took a freaking master's degree to understand how it all operated. Right. So, you can put a framework together, but I think that, yes, okay, include the Warriors in there. Those are the four most likely teams to make a major trade. It's just right now there's a Mexican standoff, and maybe the closer you get to the start of the season, the more that these high-end offers get rebuffed, the more realistic that these trades are likely to happen. But the one thing also with Philly is that Philly ultimately has their eyes on Damian Lillard, and you'll hear more of this coming up in your interview with Scoop B. I think you guys talked about that.
We did. Yep.
But what incentive does Daryl Morey have to trade Ben Simmons, his number 1 trade chip, if he can hold on to him and tough it out. As irreparable as the relationship is with Ben Simmons ghosting the team, ghosting Embiid, saying he wants to be a socialite for a California team. Fuck you, you entitled 24-year-old, by the way, if you're going to be a diva like that. But, what incentive does he have to trade Ben Simmons now if he can hold on to him and possibly use that to land Damian Lillard later? So there is a little bit of gamesmanship, but I do believe that these 4 teams will be involved in some sort of trade before the start of the season. Hopefully.
That is fair. And I will say again, like I will, now my lips are going to get sore kissing Neil Olshey's ass. I agree with you. And to reiterate your point, if you're taking the most optimistic view of what's happening right now, it's that the Blazers are trying to regain the leverage that they lost when Damian Lillard all but said, I would like to see a big trade. I think part of what you said earlier also connects in my brain. It's like if maybe Neil Olshey is peeling back the curtain more for Dame to say, hey, look, understand, like, I hear you and nothing's happened yet.
I'm trying, Jennifer.
And now I'm super serious about it, I promise, but you cannot say anything about it publicly because it ruins the leverage I may have to make a trade. So the most optimistic view is that you're right, that the Blazers, they understand, they're working on it. They're trying to regain their leverage. And the reality is we are not, here's the awful thing. Let's say a trade doesn't end up happening. You and I will never know if Olshey tried his very, very best to make that trade happen. He put every piece he could in the pot. He was moving heaven and earth, and the other team just said no. People like me are just going to say Olshey failed at his job. And ultimately, the true test of the GM is, are you able to make stuff happen? So on the one hand, that's kind of fair. On the other hand, I do want to check myself. We don't know what conversations are happening. We're never going to know what conversations are happening. We're operating in a vacuum, but that vacuum is being filled by assumptions that we make based on what? Based on the available reporting, based on history. And so based on the available reporting and based on history, I'm not optimistic that something's going to happen. Whether or not that's fully Neil Olshey's fault, I will concede I'm never going to know. Me being me, I'm probably going to blame him for it. And maybe he deserves that blame. So there's my absolute, like my most level-headed take possible. And now I will get back to hot takes only.
So, and one of the things too, that most kind of reinforces my point of that, that Dame's been let a little more behind the curtain or whatever. It's this quote. It's a little bit lengthy. I'll read it anyways, but it came from one of his press conferences before Team USA. And we'll end after this, by the way. We'll end by talking a little bit about Dame's gold that he just got. But here's his quote. He goes, obviously this go around, we weren't able to go out there and get some of the guys that we would have liked. You go down the list and you go through the guys that you like that are out there and haven't committed to another team, or that was part of your plans in free agency. And you get the ones that you just want to be a part of what you're doing. And I think that's what we did and what we were able to do. So again, that strikes me as a quote. It's not as we need to do better, as more of a, okay, I knew the plans. I knew what we wanted to do. And literally none of it came to fruition through no fault of our own. That's the closest I will get to kissing Neil Olshey's ass. But that's how I interpret Damian Lillard's comment right there.
That is fair. I want to drop a couple quick bites. One is that I just want to note that I know this is a hard pivot, but like just a couple of quick things that just floating my brain. Jusuf Nurkic has been very active on Instagram lately. And I think he's being very intentional about wearing Blazers gear in every single one of his pictures. No matter what he's doing, he's on a boat, he's on the water, he's hanging out with friends, he's playing basketball, he's working out, he's wearing Blazer stuff. I think Jusuf Nurkic is playing his part. Good for him. I also think he's that's his way of being on an apology tour of please don't trade me. Exactly. That's his way of saying I shouldn't have said what I said at that press conference. Then the other little bit I wanted to share, and I lost the tweet. I had it right here, but I believe it was Mark Stein that said yes. That Mark Stein reports that CJ McCollum has been mentioned as a potential future successor to Chris Paul as the president of the NBA Players Association, because Paul's second 4-year term is up this year. Any opinions or thoughts about CJ McCollum becoming the president of the NBPA?
Nothing. Hasn't he been kind of in a bit of their leadership community for a couple of years now? So and CJ McCollum is a very smart and very intelligent individual off the court and very well put together. It's kind of weird because he seems so quiet and so well mannered, but he's known as one of the worst trash talkers in the league.
Kind of a snarky dude. Yeah, for sure.
Yeah. But no, I mean, that's great. And I hate it too, when people try to equate like, oh, well, that's going to take away from basketball, or that's going to do this, or that's going to do that. Oh, F you. It hasn't dampened Chris Paul. I mean, yeah, he doesn't have a ring, but he's still considered his nickname is Point God.
And thankfully, CJ McCollum is under contract for a while, because maybe he leverages that position to get an even bigger contract, but we're not going to have to worry about that for a number of years. Yeah. Next week, we're going to be talking about Summer League. Ryan, you're going, right? Like, you're going to be there in Vegas.
Yes. I fly out next Thursday, and I will be there for the tail end event and the championship tournament. And currently, the Blazers are 8-1 favorites to. Seeing as it's funny. Of course, they're 8-1 favorites. I think the average age of their summer league roster is like 8 years over what everybody else's is. But no, this will be my second time down at summer league. For one, it's a heck of a lot easier now, seeing as that Brandon the Hair Kennedy actually lives down in Vegas, and it is 15 minutes off the strip. So it's a lot easier to just hop a plane and go stay down at a buddy's house. But the three of us, we have turned this into an annual guys trip of going down and hanging out down there. And I recommend it. It's a fun experience. I got into some shenanigans that I've mentioned before the last time I was down there, but it is extremely interesting to walk around, Thomas and Mack Center, and go from like this practice court gym here, where to get to your seats, you're walking on a court and kind of stepping around journalists and players and whatnot. You're sitting up in the stands, and there's rookies from the teams that just finished playing that are up there icing their knees that you can just chat with. Almost anybody who's anybody from the media you can find and hobnob with and get some like inside stories and inside scoops. It's a great experience besides just watching the basketball itself and watching young players. So I'm super excited. And like I said, this is a yearly thing, and I may have to try to drag you down there next year. I mean, Brandon's house down there, it's the real estate was kind of cheap when he bought it down in Vegas. So he has
an entire recording studio.
Okay, that thing is the size of a closet, but yes, he does have a recording studio. I believe it is a 7-bedroom, 4-bathroom house. There is a full in-ground pool surrounded by rock and water features with a rock-built water slide, and there
are elephants on site that Jody Allen can shoot.
That's going in next summer. The animal exhibit, and there is the full outdoor wraparound covered patio with the built-in grill. But still, there's room for you there if I can drag you there.
That actually sounds like a blast. It's going to be good to hear you and the boys from the Blazer Tag podcast doing some reporting, and maybe we'll sneak some stuff onto our feed. Anything else before we bounce?
We have to give congratulations to Damian Lillard finally getting the hardware. We
didn't talk about that. Yeah, good job. Gold medal game. Did you watch? I'm guessing you watched the game last night. Did you catch anything of the quarterfinals or the semifinals? I finally outsmarted the Peacock app. I paid for it. I
did not. I thought that's how I had to go, because I have YouTube TV, but I couldn't find the games live in any of their listings, which is weird because I get early access to things that are on Peacock for other channels just through my YouTube TV. Finally, I got onto the NBC Olympics website, and it allowed me to link my YouTube TV to their thing. So I was able to watch all the games from the computer. It was a little bit of a pain in the ass to have games tip off at 9:40, 10 o'clock at night, watch them in their entirety, and then wake up at 3 o'clock in the morning. But I'm also used to that. So whatever.
Because we also know even the USA is blowing out Iran by 50. You're sticking into the last second of that game.
No,
because if you weren't, you'd be a hypocrite. How much you went off on that last podcast.
Okay. Here's the difference. Intentionally turning off the game to fall asleep versus falling asleep during the game. Fine. Different things. But congrats to Dame. Yes. It was, I will say we have differing opinions on his ab injury that came out, because it came out after he played poorly and had been benched 2 games in the fourth quarter.
I almost tweeted it during the game. He didn't look right. He didn't look right.
You're
Whatever.
You're a Dame apologist, but
of course I am.
He showed up last night. Even, Kevin Durant was the leader of that team. And Kevin Durant in his post game even said, Dame brought some Dame time to the fourth quarter, helped us, and he caught on. I think Dame dropped 11 points in the fourth quarter alone, really helped Team USA pull away. But Damian Lillard, gold medal Olympian, only 2 Trailblazers in history. I believe that 3. Steve Smith. That's right. Yep. So we have Clyde Drexler, Steve Smith, Damian Lillard. There you go. As medal winning Olympians, and seeing as that this will probably be Dame's only Olympics, just based off his age, possibly, he could be a veteran leadership next time around, but really,
I think he's going to be pretty effective at 34 still, which is how old he'd be next time. But
34,
because it's 3 years from now.
Oh yeah, that's right. I keep screwing up. I forget COVID. These are the 2020 Olympics.
We lost a year. It's gone. My hope is, I don't want to spend too much time on this, but congrats to him. My hope is that him winning, does this satiate some feeling of wanting to, what does it feel like to be at the top of the top? And then maybe being in Portland isn't so bad after. I don't know. I think it's slightly good for Dame's chances to stick in Portland that he won this gold medal. That is how I'll phrase it. Slightly good. Okay.
I'm kind of disappointed that Dame did the cliche thing of biting his medals. They need to stop biting.
They were directed. I think the Olympic Committee said, please stop doing this.
Yes, because the medals are actually real gold. And real gold is, it's still to a degree, but gold is softer than human teeth. You can put bite marks in it. It ruins it. Photographers think it's cute and cool, so they ask him to do it, but they need to knock it off. It drives me insane.
But see, that's how they know I feel like my mom is that you can, Anyway,
I feel like a parent yelling at my kids, please knock it off. I'm going to hit you with a stick. But anyways, all right, we'll wrap it up here. Brandon, you have your interview coming up with Scoop B, which we will kick to now. Until next time, I will report back from how Summer League was.
Okay, see you soon.
See ya.
Here we have yet another Brandon for the second week in a row. Last week we had Brandon Sprague of 1080 The Fan. This week we have Brandon Robinson. You might know him as Scoop B. He's on the Bally Sports Network. Also hosts the Scoop B podcast. And you can also find him with Lisa Ann on Instagram every Thursday at 5 Eastern. It's another Brandon. Brandon, what's up, man? How you doing?
What up, Chief? It's been a while, man. I think it's been like a year or so. We've been trying to make it happen. Glad to be here with a fellow Brandon.
Yeah, no, for sure. You were on, I think you were on when I was still with the Trailcasters with me and Keith. So yes. That was a couple of years back, but no, I appreciate you taking the time. You are, let's just dive right in. I want to respect your time, maybe, 25 minutes, something like that. But let's talk about the Blazers, first of all, because I have to say, I was talking a little bit before we started recording. I think it's always helpful to get an outside perspective. I think it's helpful to talk about NBA teams. Yes, with the people who follow them. Yes, to the local reporters. That's all good. But I think if you don't talk to people who are plugged in to the NBA and who are following kind of the whole ecosystem of the league, I think that you're missing something. So let me start here. For the last couple months, Damian Lillard has made clear that he wants to see some improvements to this Blazers roster, which seems totally reasonable, right? I mean, you had reporting from Chris Haynes several months ago with rumbles about how he wanted to see the roster upgraded. Those rumbles have gotten stronger. Dame has now said it himself explicitly. And then you even had today, I forgot that this just happened, but he was talking at Team USA. Someone asked him about free agency. And he didn't seem super excited about what's happened so far. So let me get your opinion. What is your take on the Blazers situation and specifically with trying to make Dame happy? From your perspective, how have you been seeing this all play out from your end?
Well, firstly, when I look at Damian Lillard, I look at him as a top 10 player in the league right now. And so when you have that cachet, it's pretty well known, or pretty much just a foregone conclusion, that you have supplemental help on your roster. Yeah. LeBron James has that in Los Angeles. Kawhi has that in Los Angeles. Steph Curry has that with the Warriors. In Philadelphia, albeit what it may currently, Ben Simmons and Joel Embiid have each other. With that being said, if you're a top 10 player, you should have assets and help. That being said, I feel bad for Damian Lillard because I look at him, there's a duality to that, right? So when I look at a point guard who has scoring capabilities, a lead guard, if you will, in today's NBA, who can do a lot, that begins to put wear and tear on your body as you get older if you don't have that assistance. And I'll use two names as an example. One, Allen Iverson in Philadelphia. Two, kind of reminds me of a loyalty situation like Kevin Garnett had to Minnesota.
KG, yeah.
When he ultimately asked to be traded and he went to the Boston Celtics, and that very next season he won a championship. And so when I look at the situation with Damian Lillard, I think one of the things that's kind of disappointing is, one, with all due respect to the city of Portland, I don't think people are breaking their neck to go to Portland to play.
No.
And that's unfortunate because I've done business in Portland. I've never been to Portland, but you got to have more to offer than just Nike or Adidas. And, you know, that's Regency. That you know, it's not New York, it's not LA. I have no problem with Portland. But I think Damian Lillard is in a situation where you're so loyal like KG was to Minnesota. Your good years are gone or dwindling. And at the same time, he's kind of in a similar situation that LeBron James was in his first stint in Cleveland. Like his second stint in Cleveland, he made Cleveland cool after he won a championship in Miami. And that's pretty much all I have to say about that. I think Damian Lillard, loyalty aside, at this point has to do what's best for Damian Lillard. And from all intents and purposes, New York, Boston, and Philadelphia, in my mind, piecing together what I've seen, what I've heard, and what make logical sense, are the best destinations.
Yeah, I mean, I'm not gonna disagree, particularly about the point about Portland. I mean, you're right. Like, this is not a city where a lot of NBA players are like, oh, like, yeah, I definitely want to live in Portland because why, right? Like, but let me ask you this. You said that Damian Lillard is a top 10 player. I agree with that. In your view, do you think you can build a championship level team around Damian Lillard? Do you think that that's possible? Like, if you had your choice of players who may be available by trade, even if you kind of like take unreasonable routes to get there, like, can you build a title contending team with Damian Lillard as your best player in your view?
In Portland?
Anywhere.
Yes.
Okay. So I think that's important though, because like there are some people who say, hey, I think that he's a really good player, but you actually can't build a title team around him. So if you take that as fact, which I also do, I agree with that. I think that you can. Then let's look at Portland first, and let's talk about those other teams. So the one in Philly is particularly appealing, or if I were Damian Lillard, just think about my teammates. But in Portland, don't have a ton of assets, right? You have your picks moving forward, first round picks. Okay, fine. Don't have a lot of tradable contracts that are super attractive. I mean, CJ McCollum, he's a great player, not an all-star. He's making near max money, $30+ million a year for many, many years. In your view, is there a potential trade out there where the Blazers could package a CJ McCollum, Anthony Simons, draft picks and get something back that would lift Portland into contention? Is that possible as of right now, in your opinion? I
mean, if you look at the Toronto Raptors, if they're looking to move Pascal Siakam, you could potentially make a move in that regard. Does that bring you a championship? I'm not sure. When I look at, and I still think if you bring someone like Pascal Siakam of his ilk there, that still's not going to produce a championship because you're competing with the Lakers, you're competing with the Clippers, you're competing with the Nuggets. Heck, the Warriors healthy, you may be competing with them too. And so, yeah, I think you can package CJ McCollum, but I think at this point, Lillard is looking for a championship. I don't see him looking for just playing competitively. And I think when you sit in Tokyo and you're around Like, look, even when you're sitting in Tokyo and you're sitting with Draymond, multiple champion, right? Your teammates with Zach LaVine. The Bulls got Lonzo Ball and DeMar DeRozan. You're playing with you're teaming up with KD. KD's got Kyrie and James Harden. I don't think that what you just asked me still produces a championship at roster face value.
So then if that's, and I think that that's completely fair. So then let's look at it this way then, and we'll get into some other teams in this conversation. I think that like, if you're the Portland Trailblazers, I think if you're a fan like me, like I'm a Portland Trailblazers fan. I don't pretend to be unbiased about that, right? I mean, the fucking podcast called We Like the Blazers, right? It's like, okay, can't escape that.
Right.
But as a fan, I think a lot of fans feel this. We don't want to trade Damian Lillard. He's the best player the Blazers maybe have ever had in the history of the franchise ever. He seems to actually like it in Portland. He lives in Portland. He works in Portland. He volunteers in Portland. He talks up Portland more than our own general manager ever has in his 9-year tenure here. Our GM, by the way, seems to hate Portland, and that's fine. Go back to LA. I don't give a shit. But so we don't want to trade Dame, but in your view, is the better option for the Blazers to trade Dame right now? He's 31. Okay. His value is probably never going to be higher than it is now. He's under contract for years. He just had the best season, arguably, of his career. Doesn't seem to have any injury concerns as of right now. If you're the Portland Trailblazers, is the best move. If you don't think you can bring a championship team to Portland and keep them happy, is the best move to move him now while his value is this high?
Maybe. I think when you look at Lillard, not to kind of duck your question, but to add value to your question with my statement, I think Lillard is in a situation similarly to what Russell Westbrook was in Oklahoma City. And it's one thing to see it on TV. It's another thing to see it in person. I was with Russ the day he got traded. He was at a comedy show in Tulsa, Oklahoma. One of his best friends was there. Hosting a comedy show. And I landed when the trade was announced. And I got there. I had an interview scheduled with him. And I say all of that to say, even being in Tulsa and not being in Oklahoma City, there's about a half hour, 45 driving distance between those two cities. Mm-hmm. Even in Tulsa, the love and respect, like people in that comedy show were showing love. He got on the stage. They gave him a standing ovation because he was one of the last Thunder on that team, making the trek from Seattle there, like him, or rather he and KD were drafted by the Sonics, went over to Oklahoma, and then Harden was drafted by the Thunder. And, a couple $1 million here and there, he ended up going to the Rockets. That being said, when I look at Damian Lillard, I see a similar comparison in Portland and what he means to the city, in a way that maybe didn't even translate with someone like Allen Iverson, who was the heart and soul of Philly. And I think part of it is because Philly is a Northeast city, a top 5 market. The smaller markets have a certain level of love and respect for their stars that just translates different, in my mind, from larger markets. And so I think the fandom, the fact that he's beloved, it's hard to let that person go. You made mention of the fact that Lillard was the best Blazer ever. I'll add, he is the best Blazer ever since Clyde Drexler. And the love that y'all still have for Clyde Drexler to this day, you would think he just retired yesterday. And so when you have a star and you have a star who embraces that city and he or she loves a city, you want to hold on to it as long as you can. I mean, even somebody like Kevin Duckworth, God rest his soul, is still, loved to this day. And I just think that's credit to you guys, the city and your franchise. So I think, yes, if you're going to trade him, this is probably the best time to do it. And I hope this is not a solo clip, because there's so much context that goes to that, because I just think that he means so much to the city, and he's never given you his behind to kiss. He's always been respectful. He's always done right. The only other city that he makes mention to, aside from Portland, is his hometown of Oakland. Yeah. So if you're in a situation where you're so beloved and you give love, you try to, find a way to get him there. But by the same token, that's going to even be difficult because the Warriors are trying to retool, and James Wiseman and, Klay Thompson and others are part of the heart and soul of that Warriors dynasty. So then you start to look even further. The 76ers have an issue with Ben Simmons. They want an all-star in return. They want picks in return. The Warriors can facilitate such a move.
Yeah. I mean, everything you just said is facts. One more thing before we get into some specifics about if the Blazers were going to trade Dame, where he could go. Let me ask you this. As someone who covers the league, again, I go back to this, people who didn't like Terry Stotts as the coach. He wasn't the best coach. He also wasn't the worst coach, right? Mm-hmm. And so there are some folks here in Portland, I think, are like, well, we see what Stotts does. We're in a better position to evaluate him. And he was really, really bad. And NBA analysts just didn't understand how bad he was. And I don't buy that. I think that to evaluate a coach or GM, you have to be able to see the whole league. Okay. And so I want to ask you about Neil Olshey. He's been here 9 years. He's been here the entire time Damian Lillard's been here. His name was on the door when Dame was drafted, but a whole other story about the work for Damian Lillard being drafted was done before Neil Olshey got here. But leaving that aside, Olshey's been here the whole time. Do you think that Neil Olshey has put Damian Lillard in a position to win? Do you think that he's done a good enough job building around Dame in his 9 years in Portland?
I think Neil Olshey has done a good job. He brought Damian Lillard in. I think that from just speaking to others, it's kind of blasphemous to speak negatively on him. But I think you have the right to give constructive criticism. You also have the right to ask for more. And so if you didn't win a championship, you have the right to criticize. And I think this kind of is in line with kind of Carmelo Anthony's plight. Always been an all-NBA player, always been congenial with reporters, always, well-liked by younger folks, people that are his contemporaries. But the one thing that was missing was a championship in his display case. I feel like comparatively, the Lakers and the Spurs in the West were always his Achilles heel, talking about Melo. I think Lillard is in a similar situation where you expect of a top 10 player that he wins a championship. I think prior to Anthony Davis going to the Lakers, he was a top 20, 25 player. Going to Los Angeles made him a top 10 player, both by optics and by winning a championship. And I have that same expectation for Lillard. I think Olshey being there for 9 years, not producing a championship in a competitive West for obvious similar reasons, there was just better teams out there, gives you the right to criticize. I don't know him. I've never met him. But at the same time, I do think that they haven't won a championship. So we start there. You have a top 10 player. He seems unhappy. You find a way to keep him there to win a championship. But there are just certain teams in my mind that just don't win championships. All 30 teams are, the team is not going to win championships. And I'll add this. When I was watching the Phoenix Suns against the Phoenix Suns in the finals against the Bucks, I said to myself, damn, certain people just aren't supposed to win championships. When you like, and I feel like they had two opportunities to do so, 93 and now, and this was their best chance. Michael Jordan's Bulls were going to just kick the Suns' behind no matter what. And Portland was in a similar situation in the finals in 92. I don't want to speak bad on your team, but there's just certain teams that just don't win championships. And then certain teams they're like, oh, wow, the Heat won, but they're electric. The Cavs won, but they had LeBron and LeBron had to come back. And if it wasn't for LeBron leaving and really it was a sign and trade, they would have never got Kyrie or Tristan Thompson.
Yep.
I don't want to speak negatively on Portland, but everybody's not going to win a championship.
That's true. No, and you're not at all. And like, look, the best chance the Blazers have had in my lifetime, because I kind of agree with you about in the early 90s. I'm not sure they were destined to win either of those times. I think it was in 2000. I think it's when they blew 15-point lead Game 7 against the Lakers. That was it right there.
They had a squad.
Oh, damn. Yeah, that was such a good team. It was so much fun to watch. Scottie Pippen, Steve Smith, and like
Shee Wallace, Damon Stoudemire, Bonzi
Wells. Yeah, it was, man. So before I make myself sad thinking about that, one thing you said about Anthony Davis caught my ear, which is, he became a top 10 player partially by nature of playing with LeBron James. I would love to see what Damian Lillard would do with that kind of talent for his teammate, right? Like, he's the last time Damian Lillard's had an all-star teammate was LaMarcus Aldridge, right? Before he left in 2015. And LaMarcus Aldridge, borderline all-star, even though he made it 6, 7, 8 times, and really good player, no doubt about that. I would love to see Damian Lillard with a teammate who is as good or better than him, and to see what he'd look like in a system like that, which brings us to possible trade destinations, which I don't like talking about this, but I think it's important. So you mentioned a couple teams earlier where you think that Damian Lillard might be a good fit, that you think that a team might want to see him. And the first one that does come to my mind is the Philadelphia 76ers. So what would a team with Damian Lillard and Joel Embiid, what would that look like? And like, what would the Sixers or really any team have to offer in order to get a Damian Lillard, who again, he's under contract for 1,000 years, right? His extension hasn't even begun yet. What would the Sixers have to give up, and what would their team look like if they were to make that move?
You'd have to facilitate probably 3 teams. It would have to be a 3-team trade, where essentially you'd have to include, or could include, I won't say have to, you could include a Warriors team, you could include a Toronto Raptors team, you could include a Sacramento team. And that, again, that kind of ties into the whole Ben Simmons situation, because I think Ben Simmons and Damian Lillard are very similar but different situations, because the Sixers have had conversations with about 11 or 12 teams about Ben Simmons. That being said, if Ben does not come back and Lillard is unhappy, you can make both teams happy. So you'd have to include a package with the Warriors. I keep saying have to, but you could include a package with the Warriors, the Sixers, and the Blazers, where you would include James Wiseman on the Golden State side. You would have picks. You would also have Moody, potentially, who's been playing well in the Summer League. And I think you'd be in a situation where the 76ers would likely have to include Matisse Thybulle or Tyrese Maxey. And then on the Blazers side, you have to provide Damian Lillard. And so that's a scenario there. Aside from Damian Lillard, the Sixers could even include a 4th team. I know that they've had conversations with the Sacramento Kings. I know Buddy Hield has not been happy since he didn't get his extension while Vlade Divac was there, and then was disappointed when Vlade left. So, Philadelphia has, from what I understand, has salivated over Hield for years. And so I look at that situation there. You could include a 4th team, and you kind of saw in that Spencer Dinwiddie trade, or sign and trade, that was ultimately 4 teams that were involved. The Lakers were part of the Russell Westbrook trade that got, Kyle Kuzma to Washington, that got, you could include a 4th or a 5th team. And, I spoke with some folks over in Washington that told me they were taking their time. And so in the same breath, that could be said with the Warriors and the 76ers. If Ben Simmons is unhappy, help him. If Damian Lillard is unhappy, help himself there too.
What's going on with Ben Simmons in Philadelphia? I mean, you had, both Joel Embiid and Doc Rivers kind of throwing him under the bus, right, in their last loss after the playoffs. And now, I thought I saw some stuff today where it seems like Ben Simmons isn't even returning calls from the team. Like, do you know, like, what's like, how untenable is that situation? Like, how unhappy is he really?
Yeah, that was a report from Jason Dumas out in Oakland, who is from the Philadelphia area as well. We have mutual friends. What I'll say to you is the situation with Ben Simmons, from all the things that I've heard and things that have other stuff that has been reported, honestly, this has been something that, has been kind of a thing for a couple years. I think that if Ben Simmons is ultimately moved, it's going to remind people 10 years from now of a similar situation in Orlando with Shaq and Penny years ago, a dynasty missed. This is a situation in Philadelphia, even in 2019, they were a Kawhi Leonard jump shot away from going to the finals. And then, this season they were being talked about in the same breath as Brooklyn, and Milwaukee ended up winning the championship that year. So in answer to your question about Ben Simmons, I know that the 76ers have had conversations with teams since last year. I know that there are teams that Ben Simmons would benefit. I think one of the things that gets lost in translation, particularly in 24-hour news coverage and digital media, is this. There are a lot of teams that would give their last to bring Ben Simmons to their team. Yeah. And the only criticism that we have is the jump shot, but we never talk about his playmaking ability. That being said, when someone is special in a good way, not special, when somebody is special in a good way, you have to put different things around them to cultivate that level of specialness, if that's a word. Yeah. And so with that being said, a team like the Warriors would fit him like a glove. Heck, a team like Sacramento would fit him like a glove. I think another team that gets lost in translation quite a bit is the Denver Nuggets, who have a lot of assets that they could move to potentially bring some Ben Simmons in there. I think Michael Porter is a great piece that would flourish quite well in Philadelphia. And so I think, when you look at Ben Simmons, I think he's temperamental, but who isn't sensitive or very particular about what they're good at. And so I think sometimes, like, I won't dog or I won't bash Ben Simmons because I think he's a talented player. And I think that in today's NBA, the point guard has transitioned into being a scorer. And you criticize a point guard being a scorer, but I know in the 90s, in the 80s, and the 70s, the goal of the point guard was to be a playmaker. And so I think even in last season, when Brett Brown was the coach of the 76ers, I spent some time with the Sixers last season when pre-COVID and even like on Zoom calls. Mm-hmm. I like the way Brett Brown used him going into the playoffs at the 4, sagging at the elbow. Like, I feel like when I look at Ben Simmons, I feel like you have to utilize him like Miami did in year 2 when they won the championship with Eric Spoelstra. So, I look at that situation with Ben Simmons again. People talk about his jumper, call him this, call him that. He's a talented basketball player. He's just got to be, you change a plant's environment and you water it and you let it grow, it's going to flourish into a nice plant. And I feel like that's what's got to happen with him. I think a team like Denver would benefit him much. A team like Minnesota would benefit him much.
Yeah, and I've always thought the fit between Ben Simmons and Embiid was a little odd. I mean, Embiid's a talented perimeter player, but he's at his best around the hoop. And Ben Simmons has to have some space to cut he's not going to be floating out on the 3-point line. Like, you need to give him space inside to work. I never thought that fit was the cleanest.
Joel Embiid is literally tall Allen Iverson from the perimeter all the way to the hoop. Mm-hmm. Meaning guys are going to watch him stand around dancing. He can face you up. He can back you down. He can play well defensively. He's just a free-flowing artist that can even command a double team. I think he's literally Chris Webber, Hakeem Olajuwon, and flashes of Rasheed Wallace all in one.
It's never, ever going to happen. It'd be so much fun to see Dame and Embiid play together in Portland. That's not going to happen. So, hey, yeah, if Dame wants to go, if the team can't build around him, I think this is something that you'll find too, Blazers fans. I don't think there's any of us that are ever going to blame Dame when he gets to the point where he says, I got to go. I mean, he's given everything to the city. He's probably like, even when I was a little kid, like I always valued the team more than any individual player, even Clyde. this is the first time in my life I'm like, wow, I mean, I really wouldn't blame him one bit. Let me get you out of here with one more question, because there's been a lot that's happened around the NBA. Not so much of the Blazers during free agency. A lot of movement has happened. I don't know how many more pieces there are really to fall. I mean, my thought was that once you get the free agency piece sorted out, that maybe you'll start seeing some trades happen. You mentioned Siakam, you mentioned Simmons, you mentioned Beal. In your view, is there anything that NBA fans? Oh yeah, go. Yeah, sorry.
I didn't mention Beal.
Okay,
Beal,
my bad.
No, but you're fine, because Beal was a piece pre-trades that many people thought would be gone. And I think he had the world as his oyster in that regard, because he sat back. Beal, like Lillard, or in a situation where they are beloved by those constituents in that respective city. But I think
Washington's had even less success than the Blazers, That's
subjective, though, because while I agree with you, they're still a Northeast city, and they benefited from Michael Jordan.
Yeah.
They also benefited from having a playoff run with Gilbert Arenas, and then transition from Gilbert Arenas to John Wall. And I think that this resurgence, bringing in Russell and then using Russell as a trade piece to get Kuzma, to get Kentavious Caldwell-Pope, and to get Montrez, and then to ultimately get Spencer Dinwiddie. I think that this team is definitely, on paper at least, a top 8 team. I think that they just got the gel, and that gelling period takes some time. And I think it's a low expectation, high reward, brand new coach. And, Tommy's been working behind the scenes, the GM, to make some things happen. And, they've been successful. So I think that Bradley Beal, the deck of cards is in his control, because if he leaves, they still got a good team. And if he leaves, he's only going to raise his value, and self-preservation is so important, because, he was a league leader in scoring. He doesn't have to overexert himself so much at this point.
Yeah, no, that's a good point. If you were to kind of keep your eye on something, if there's a move that you suspect may happen between now and training camp, what might that move be? And please tell me that it involves the Blazers being better and keeping Dame.
Well, I'll tell you what, I find it interesting that Kevin Knox is now not on the Knicks Summer League team, because I felt like Knox, like Moody and Golden State, were going to be used as showcase pieces for other teams. And so, I'll tell you that going into free agency, I was told by those in the know with the Knicks that basically if Lillard is interested, cool. Like, he sent those smoke screens that the Knicks may be a team of interest. Cool. And I think they kind of still manage their deck of cards, because they've kept their costs low. And they have assets, like the Knicks, like the Spurs, both had the most assets going into free agency. I also think you should be paying attention to, not so much going into training camp, but just in the next year, Karl-Anthony Towns. Will he stay or will he go? I think he's saying all the right things. I feel like if he stays, that's great. But if he goes, I think the Memphis Grizzlies, as well as the New York Knicks, will be a great fit.
Yeah, Karl-Anthony Towns. It's again something that's never going to happen. But again, thinking about a player like that playing with Dame would just be wild. But we can only dream. Okay, Scoop, I appreciate you. Thank you for taking the time. Again, it's always good to get a perspective from somebody who's actually watching the whole league. So yeah, thanks for taking the time out. If people wanted to find you and your work and connect with you, how would people do that?
Follow me on Twitter at ScoopB. Check out my written work as well as on-camera work at Bally Sports Network. I started in May. In addition to that, every Thursday on Instagram Live through Bovada, which is a sports betting company, I host an Instagram Live with porn star legend and current SiriusXM host Lisa Ann. We break down free agency, talk, and we have a good time talking about basketball. So, yeah, those are the vehicles: Instagram and Snapchat, Scoop_B. And subscribe to the Scoop B Radio podcast, which is available on all streaming platforms: Apple, Google Play, TuneIn, Stitcher, iHeart, or simply by visiting scoopbradio.com.
Heck yeah. Scoop, thank you. Appreciate you.
Brother, thank you.